We know that healthcare executives have their sights on high reliability, just culture, and psychological safety. In true Capstone fashion, we're all about helping simplify the complex and helping entire healthcare organizations execute successfully on big, bold initiatives such as these. One such way that we can help is through our upcoming Healthcare Executive Forum. In its 13th year, this forum has been helping healthcare executives learn proven approaches for executing successfully on big, bold initiatives. So, whether you're just starting your journey to high reliability or well on your way, this event has something for everyone. Our time honored commitment is that every attendee leave with an actionable and impactful plan that they can just start when they get back to the office the next day. The event is on June 18th and 19th in Madison, Wisconsin, and you can go to capstoneleadership.net and under the resources page, look for the details on our upcoming events. Plan now for you and your executive team to attend.
But then when you have, the whole group of leaders in one organization, you can just feel the synergy there and also like the vision of how are they going to come together to achieve this.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzloff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
Welcome to another episode of Culture Change RX. Today is one of those episodes where I have the delight of having a guest in the studio, and it is a guest that is on our Capstone team, but also she serves as a chief executive officer in a hospital in Wisconsin. And we're glad she's here with us today. We have a topic that we're going to talk about, but I'll introduce that in a moment because first I'm going to have her introduce herself. So Tami, take it away.
Hello, Sue. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on this podcast. As you said, I'm currently the CEO at Grant Regional Health Center in Lancaster, Wisconsin, and have been in that role for a little over a year. I'm a nurse by training and never thought that I would be here sitting and serving in this role, but so grateful for the journey that led me here. I started my healthcare profession as a nurse at the bedside in a cardiac ICU at a large tertiary care facility, then started my leadership journey there. Never in a million years thought I would ever leave that place because it was great. But again, life happens and it led me here to Grant. And I previously served in the role of Chief Clinical Officer, which was really kind of a dual role of CNO and COO. And then, of course, got the blessing of being selected as the CEO about a year ago.
Yes. We met you. We first met you real close to the time you joined Grant Regional as their chief clinical officer. And that actually is what kind of is going to be our theme today, Tami, is to talk about one of the events or the encounters where our company, Capstone Leadership Solutions, was on site at Grant Regional doing something that we call a 2-day leadership immersion. I'm just going to turn it over to you to explain to our audience and those that don't know what that even is. In your view, how would you describe a 2-day leadership immersion, and in particular, the one that happened there at Grant Regional when you first became the clinical officer there?
Yeah, I can remember the exact seat I was sitting in the venue we were in. This was my first executive position. I had been a director at a large tertiary care facility, but first time sitting on the executive team. So I was, a little in over my head, and it was perfect timing for Capstone to come because we had that 2-day leadership immersion. And I really felt like I had a roadmap on how to execute and execute well with a lot of strategy. And it was the perfect time to get that. Again, it was new leadership. Our CEO and myself joined the organization, and then you guys came about a month later. And it was just a great way for not only us and our new roles to start this new journey for our organization, but immediately get our leaders rowing the boat in the same direction with the same strategy, with the same understanding of the what, why, and how we lead around here, how we team around here. It was just perfect. And, as a new leader, usually as a leader, if we want change, we have to maybe create something new. We have to plan on how we're going to educate. And Capstone just came in and gave it to us. And then we could take the framework, make it our own, make it better. And our organization has had tremendous success. And I've told Sue many, many times, I don't believe we could have done it without Capstone.
That's a high compliment. That's a really high compliment. We do know the amount of work and effort, though, that goes into it on your end. We surely do, but we love being your guide and your strategists and your trainers and coaches. So I know that thinking about just the idea, I think some people, when they hear 2 days sitting in a training room all together, learning very intently, maybe some of the things are new, maybe some of them aren't, but maybe they're things that you're not sure what to do within your leadership. That sounds kind of daunting, maybe, or overwhelming. Tell me what you saw and felt in those 2 days, and maybe what you heard or observed in the others that were also there.
Of course, 2 days of any content can be overwhelming. And it's just like you have to be a sponge and soak it all up and know and grant yourself some grace that you don't have to do everything all at once. But it's so nice to get that foundation, all of that information. So then at the end of the day, too, to say, what are we going to do? We can prioritize what strategies we want to execute first. And then we can always go back to those resources and that education foundation that we received in those 2 days to then continue our work. I have always been a lifelong learner. I remember sitting in that seat, just frantically taking notes and trying to think, how am I going to remember how to do all of this? And I reference my materials so often because I'll be like, you know what? I remember we talked about something. I can't remember exactly what it was. So I look at my notes, I can look at the resources that Capstone has available, and I can quickly brush up on that. So it doesn't take too much time for me to make a move on a certain topic. And it was just, again, so great that the whole leadership team was learning the same thing all together. Oftentimes, it's not like you're sitting in that room for 2 days of strictly didactic training. It's you get the what, why, and how of the core 9 leadership bundle items. You talk about one topic, and then there are nice breakout groups where talking about what is our current practice in our organization? How can we elevate it? Is this brand new to us? And how do we want to do it? And it's just so great to be together as leaders offsite to talk about these things, because usually we don't have a lot of intentional time to be strategic and think about these things together because sometimes we're sucked up by the whirlwind. So yeah, it's an overwhelming 2 days, but so great. I can remember being overwhelmed day 1 and day 2 thinking, all right, we got this. It's going to be work, but we can do it. And I'm just so glad that we have the structure to make it happen.
Yeah, yeah. You hinted at the 9 core leadership practices, and I'm suspecting that some of our audience may not be familiar with what we call our leadership bundle, which is 9 core leadership practices. So a little context about that before we move on is that 13 plus years ago now, when Capstone was formed, one of the things we knew was part of the success practices that Jane and I, as a co-founder, had experienced in our own organization-wide transformation was really being able to very clearly define how is it that we want leaders to lead here, so that we reduce that variation between, this leader does it this way and this leader does it that way, and this leader doesn't have a practice for that at all. And we knew that that was something that we had to bring forward when we were working in partnership with organizations for their organization-wide improvement and growth, is that we had to really define this is how we lead around here. So the 9 core leadership practices are the central foundation of the 2-day leadership immersion, is really introducing leaders to all 9 before they are expected to learn more and to implement more so that they can see it in context of the whole big picture before they start really getting competent, consistent, and really comfortable with it all. So they get to see the baked cake before they start putting in the ingredients, and then they start learning about each ingredient. So since that time though, what's really exciting since all those years ago when you were sitting there in an immersion with your other co-leaders there at Grant, you now teach immersions. So you're actually at the front of the class and you're in front of the audience now. So tell us what that feels like, Tami.
I love it because, and I say this every time I teach the immersion, it's so easy for me to speak about this framework, the leadership bundle, because I lived it, I did it, and it was highly successful. So it is just such a joy to be able to experience something so profound like that and then share it with others because it's not, we could try all sorts of different things and we hope that it sticks. But this, if you do it and you do it well, it will serve such a great purpose in your own individual leadership, your relationship with those you lead, but then also the organization that you're contributing to. It's just such good, purposeful, intentional work. So it's so exciting to give back to others in these immersions. And again, every time before I go to an event, I remind myself, how did I feel sitting in that front row? Take me back to that moment and, have that empathy for those individuals who are going to be sitting in that room for the next 2 days for the immersion and really making sure I connect with them on that level. And also knowing when we do these immersions, we don't have all of the answers. Just a couple months ago, I went to a new organization, did their leadership immersion with another partner in Capstone, and I learned some ideas from them. And it was like we had these breakout group sessions and I had questions for them to work together and I'd go around and I came home with so many different notes and ideas on what can we do to elevate our practice here at Grant. And we've been on that journey for 6 years. So it's really giving to others and like inspiring them and also connecting with them to know, gosh, your future is so bright and I'm here to help you. And we're all humans. We hope to have human connection and relationships. So the people that I've met along the way is so incredible. Just the other day, I reached out to another CEO that was at one of the locations and just wanted to say, hey, how's it going? I'm thinking about you, how are things going? And that's just great. I just love the connections and this purposeful work.
Yes, yes. There's so much that you said there. One of the things that really did resonate was one is your empathy for the audience and your feeling of helpfulness. That's so nursey of you, really.
Yeah.
It's so nursey of you, isn't it? But also, you mentioned that you learn things too when you teach, and we like to use that phrase, in teaching we learn. And I've been doing this as well for many years, and I'm still learning as well. I think, when great questions come up or people that have had similar experiences or use of practices, they talk about it. I still learn. So I love that, even when we're their teacher, we can still have these great opportunities where we're growing too. I'm curious, this is a question for you about the 9 core leadership practices. And you mentioned that, last time you went to an immersion, you were paired up with another transformational coach from Capstone to co-teach that. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 3 there. And so you divide and conquer, you decide who's going to teach what. What's your favorite topic to teach? Which of the 9 core practices is your favorite one to teach?
Good one. That's a really hard question because I love them all. The 2 topics that jump into my head first are wellness and resilience, and which is so funny because, sometimes I'm good at that and sometimes I'm not. So it seems like whenever I have signed up to do an immersion, it just happens to be a time where I need to dust off my resiliency plan and really focus because, I can't serve from an empty cup. And it's just very humbling to remind each other of that and teach that message. And in those moments, think, okay, I need to listen to the words that I'm saying and take action. I also love the hiring and onboarding because I just love teaching and I love helping others thrive and grow in their roles. And it really starts when you hire and when you interview, and, you can have just really straightforward interview practices, or you can enhance them and be very intentional. And I've just seen such great results with a little extra work in the interview process to be intentional about what maybe attributes you're seeking out, you can really create your team very quickly and avoid some headaches. Of course, there's always challenges, but there's
Hmm.
just so many different things that you can do in the interview process and then onboarding to set people up for success, develop those relationships. Those are two really big topics, but hiring and onboarding is really, I think, where it begins because you welcome a new team member to your team. You give them expectations. Your employees want to do a good job. You want them to do a good job too. And it's so nice to kind of set the stage with expectations, helping them feel like they belong, feel like they're supported, feel like they're heard. And then, the magic happens after that.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually just teaching that this week out in Arizona. That was one of the topics that I was able to teach out there to a group of leaders. And I was reminded again, every time you teach, you learn, right? But you also, to your point about resiliency, you're just reminded again about the importance of it in your own life and in your own work and in your own world. And then you can teach from that place of really firm belief and empathy and understanding, like you mentioned. Here's another twist, too, that many audience members may not know is that our bulk of our work in Capstone is in partnership with organizations like Grant Regional, where we're working alongside them for 2+ years to adopt things like this leadership bundle within their culture in their workplace. That's one of several things that we partner with them with. But we also do offer our 2-day immersion experience for the public. And we do that through what we call the Capstone Leadership Summit. And actually, that's one of the signature programs that we developed in 2012. And it's pretty much stayed the same since that time. Of course, we're always updating the content with new examples and new evidence and data and stories about how these 9 core practices bring value to healthcare organizations. But you've also taught at a summit. You've also, and did you find that to be different when you go in as the teacher and you're teaching a really diverse audience where the leaders are coming from so many different places and so many different organizations, even types of organizations? They're not all from hospitals. They might be from nursing homes or surgery centers or home health or places like that. Heck, we've even had people come from education, and we even had people from like a funeral home there one time. And we coin it truly as a healthcare leadership conference, but they're like, all this stuff can work in our business too. And they're right, actually. They're right. But did you find as an instructor or teacher at Capstone Leadership Summit, did you find it different than the experience of being in an audience where the entire organization, all their leaders are together, learning all together?
Yeah, I think it's different. I mean, you always have kind of 3 audiences, and no matter what venue you are, the people who have never heard of the principles that you talked about, the people that have maybe heard a little bit about it and dabbled in it, and then you have those, go-getters who have implemented all of those ideas. And so to keep them, I mean, as the presenter, that's your chore or your job to hit all 3 of them and make sure that they're walking away from these summits with helpful information to elevate their leadership. So, yeah, they're diverse and they're different, but they're fun in their own ways, because if you have more diversity in the room with all different organizations, the ideas that flow are just really cool. But then when you have, the whole group of leaders in one organization, you can just feel the synergy there, and also like the vision of how are they going to come together to achieve this. And compared to the summit, when you come there as an individual contributor, that's just taking all that information. That's such great, valuable work, because you're right. These principles work no matter if you're the only leader in your organization doing it or you have them all. It's just different, but very applicable. So yeah, I like changing it up to have both, because both audiences are great.
And they get the same workbook. And I know you mentioned the workbook earlier. Interestingly, we're working on the most updated revisions to that workbook right now. That seems like, 13 years later, that's still always a work in process to make sure that that workbook is very useful beyond the training. It has to be useful at the training, but we hear from leaders, just like you mentioned, is that workbook and all your notes that you took in there becomes kind of your go-to desk reference for leadership. And we've even had leaders call or email us saying, can I get a new workbook because mine is destroyed because it doesn't sit on a shelf. It's been sitting on my desk for the last 5 years since I went to Summit or Immersion. And I just need a new fresh copy for my notes and to have as a reference. So the workbook is important, whether it's for an immersion or whether it's for a summit. What else happens like after the summit though, like, or after the immersion? I'm really curious, like in your organization, like we say that leadership development is a process, not an event. An immersion is really a leadership development event, but it's not the one and done, end all, be all. It starts kind of a process of ongoing, continuous learning in the organization. So at Grant, what happened after the immersion? Like what kind of things happened in the world of leadership development at Grant after that?
A lot changed. Before I came here to Grant, there wasn't really structured leadership development. And that was something that we heard from the leaders that they wanted more investment in them, more investment in their education, knowledge, all of those types of things. So once we partnered with Capstone, we really started scheduling those quarterly leadership development events where we all come together on a specific topic that was usually voted on by the management group to say, what are your top topics and what do you need to know more about so you can be more of an effective leader. We come together, we have that designated time for training, and then we have roadmaps that we as leaders sit in that room and we decide, yep, we're here to learn and listen and retain information. But then within our roadmap, it's just basically a to-do list. Out of each topic that we discussed, what are we committing to doing? Because you can go to a leadership development and sit there for 2 hours and watch the clock, or you can choose to invest in yourself and invest in the people that you lead. And just a really great way to capture that is with your roadmap and just writing down what are you going to do and then keeping that on your desk until that is really hardwired to make sure, because if you come back and you let the whirlwind, and your day-to-day operations suck you up, you're going to forget that knowledge that you just learned. But having that roadmap sit there until I know that I've hardwired the practice, then I can put it away. And in our organization, we have kind of business meetings. We call them monthly accountability meetings. So our vice presidents meet with all of their direct reports on a monthly basis. And for this business meeting, review their book of business, operations, quality, all of those great things. But after a leadership development event, we have them bring their roadmap, which is another layer of accountability to say, hey, this is what I learned. This is what I committed to doing differently as a leader. And then their leader can have that discussion and they can figure out how to support each other to make sure those goals are met. So just having that additional layer of accountability and discussion brings up those teachings one more time to keep them alive and well.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are such great practices of, like I said, a leadership development event has one purpose, but these other activities in between leadership events are really what helps, in your words, help leaders to hardwire these practices. When I think of that phrase, of course, it makes me think of Quint Studer, love his work and his book, Hardwiring Excellence. But when leaders hardwire these practices, they can't not do them anymore. Like if I were to come work at Grant, I couldn't not do these things. Like I don't even know how to lead any other way now. Even if no one else in the organization use these practices as leaders, like I can't even imagine not using these practices now that I have these practices hardwired and I've experienced the results that are on the other side of them as well. So I know you mentioned, this word hardwiring, but, some leaders are going to struggle more than others, maybe not with all practices, but certain practices. So, that continuous process of support and help and accountability, such as the roadmap and the monthly accountability meetings. So who keeps the training going? Training isn't one and done, and we have to keep this going. And now we need to onboard new leaders to this. Who does the training there? Do you have to do it all, Tami?
No, I do not have to do it all, thankfully. We do have a little subcommittee at our organization that helps doing surveys of our leaders to know that what we're going to teach them on. Actually, that's a resource that Capstone provided to us, that there's just every 2 years we survey our leaders about what are the topics for leadership development that they want to learn more about. And then we take those results and then we plan really intentionally of what are the topics going to be for the next year. So our subcommittee works on that. So I have the privilege to work with our HR director, Stacey Martin, who is just absolutely fantastic. So her and I put our heads together, create a plan for the year, and then we share it with our leadership team and our steering team of our journey just to say, okay, this is what we're planning. Is there anything else that we need to be aware of? Because we don't want to overwhelm our people with too many things in too short of time. So we really want to be intentional about this. And then we decide, once we have the topics decided, we think, okay, who in our building has the most knowledge? Who's the most expert person who has a passion to really elevate this performance? So we have tapped on the shoulder of many of our staff members, and we have some of our leaders that we give them some additional training, and they're considered a peer champion in our building of one of these leadership bundle items. So we actually just had an LDI where 2 of our department managers taught the LDI session and facilitated it, which I just thought was really impactful and powerful. Little stressful for them, but great practice.
In teaching, we learn, right? We learn lots of things like getting up and teaching our peers.
Yep. But then there are some times where we feel like we need to have external people come in and teach us on a topic, because sometimes it is helpful to get that outside voice. So every year we have Capstone come in with a coach or 2 and have an LDI on site for us there. So we try to mix and match it. We do education a bunch of different ways. It's, didactic training, but then through videos, through activities. And we really want to make sure that we are intentional about these adult learners in the room and knowing that not everybody learns the same.
It's interesting. You mentioned that survey that we do a leadership learning needs assessment. We do that at the start of each of the engagements with our new partners, but then repeat it as part of their process for keeping the learning going. And we captured other data there, not just learning needs, but data about how leaders are feeling about the organization's commitment to their development, their effectiveness of developing their leadership effectiveness, those kind of things. And I mean, the transformation in those results at Grant Regional since you started are really quite impressive. I mean, like you went from being really, really low to really, really high in 1 to 2 years, which is really just hats off, right? Because I think that a lot of small healthcare organizations or any small business may have this mindset that we're not a school, we're not a teaching environment, we're not a university, and yet we're taking on or we're feeling the need to take on teaching leaders how to lead. And that's a whole different set of skills and knowledge and systems and processes that maybe we have none of right now. And we've got to build this from the ground up. And then for you guys to do that in such a short period of time so successfully. And again, it started with first that assessment and plan, but then that immersion happened like in the first few months of this work. But now you've got it. Like you've got a system for training your leaders ongoingly and onboarding them to 9 core leadership practices and helping them all get successful with that. So I'm just wondering if you have any words of inspiration and rah-rah for healthcare organizations out there that are saying, I think we need to outsource this. I don't think we can build this on our own. I don't think we have the bandwidth for this. We don't have an OD department. Our HR department can't take on another project. I have nobody to champion this. Like, what would be your words of advice and inspiration to those that, 1, know they probably need to do it, and 2, can't believe they can?
Yeah. I would say just do it. Even if you hire somebody from the outside to come in and do all of your education, it's not going to be exactly what you want. And by doing it kind of homegrown with the assistance of, a company like Capstone, you can really enhance it and alter it to make it fit your needs. And I won't lie, it was a lot of work at the beginning, a lot of work. But then as you mentioned about the results, when you see it working, it just continues to energize you to say, you know what, we are making a difference. And that's why we do what we do as leaders. So yes, it's work. It's intentional work. And it's like anything. I mean, if you try a new habit at home, it's going to be a lot of work right at the beginning until it's part of your routine. It's just part of how you lead and what you do. And then it's not really work. It's more fun at that point. So I would say, yes, it is a lot of work. Is it worth it? And again, I'll say it over and over and over again. I don't think I would be sitting in the seat that I am today or having the success I have been blessed to have if it wasn't for this foundation and this framework from Capstone.
Again, a very high compliment. And we have appreciate being part of your journey and watching where it has taken you so far. And we're just wondering what's next, what will be next. So, this 30 minutes just flew right by like it always does, is when we're having a fun and purposeful conversation on a great topic like developing the effectiveness of leaders and small rural hospitals, which is our jam here at Capstone Leadership Solutions. We are so excited for Grant Regional and its future success. You were just telling me before we went on the air today of some amazing, growth and opportunities for your hospital to serve its community even better. You just keep improving, you just keep growing. And now you're in that role as the CEO to, be part of that from a different seat on the bus. And it's just a joy and lots of fun. And we're so glad you're still on our team so that you still have time for doing things like leading immersions at new partner hospitals that are starting on a similar journey. So any final comments, Tami, before we say goodbye?
No, I don't think so. Thanks again for allowing me the opportunity to share my story. I really do love sharing this story and the partnership that, you and I have had over the years. And I just hope it inspires somebody else to take the leap and be courageous and elevate their leadership.
Mm-hmm. And just start.
Yes.
Just start. All right. Thanks, Tami.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.